Good evening. I'm Debbie Scheller from A Likely Story Bookstore, and on behalf of A Likely Story and Carroll County Public Library, welcome to our Summer Read Series. Tonight we have Susannah Marren and in conversation with Eliza Knight. Be sure to type any questions for Susannah and Eliza in the chat window. We will get to them after the conversation. Susannah is the pen name for Susan Shapira Barish. She is the author of 3 fiction novels, writing as Susannah Marren, as well as 12 nonfiction women issue writings as Susannah Shapira Barish. For over 20 years, she has taught gender studies at Marymount Manhattan College and has guest taught creative fiction, nonfiction at the Writing Institute at Sarah Lawrence College. Palm Beach Scandal is Susan's 3rd novel, and it is set in the exclusive, glamorous world of Palm Beach. A Palm Beach Scandal is a story for our times, a captivating tale of discovery, sisterhood, and love for others where you least expect it. Susannah will be in conversation with Eliza Knight. Eliza is a USA Today bestselling author of historical fiction and historical romance novels. Her newest novel, You've Got Plaid, is the newest release in the Prince Charlie's Angels Highlander series. Eliza is the master of Scottish romance. Both authors' books are available at A Likely Story Bookstore and at the Carroll County Public Library. Thank you both for joining us tonight, and congratulations to you both on your new books. And Eliza, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you very much for that great introduction. I'm really excited to be here with you guys tonight, especially you, Susannah. I had the pleasure of reading your book this past week while I was at the beach in Florida, so that was very fun. So my first question for you is, what made you decide to set your book amongst the glitz and glam of Palm Beach, and what sort of research went into building your world?
Well, first of all, I'm so glad to be doing this with you and with the bookstore and library. So thank you. Well, that's a great question. And Palm Beach has long intrigued me. My parents were actually residents for many years. And my mother came from Brooklyn before it was cool. And she had never seen anything like Palm Beach. The beauty and the elite quality, the privilege, and the fact that no one really apologized for it. People really loved this lavish life. And so having written nonfiction about how women really feel as wives and mothers and sisters and rivals and mothers-in-law and daughters-in-law, particularly the role of wife, which has long intrigued me in contemporary society. I used to walk on Worth Avenue, the kind of Rodeo Drive of Palm Beach, and everyone was so coiffed and so dressed and so studied, and they all seemed so happy. And I said to myself, based on my research, I wonder what really lurks beneath. And so that's why I chose a very beautiful place where money is no issue to take a look at how women really truly feel about their emotional lives.
You did a really good job with that. So do you have any siblings?
I do. I have an older brother.
Okay,
but I do have 2 daughters and a son. So if you're going to get to the question about, this being a very deep sister story, I'm really looking deeply into the sister bond. What do we owe ourselves as sisters? How do we feel as sisters when we're put to the test? It was because of all of my research, as I said before, about how women feel in contemporary society. And I have written a book on sisters. I actually did a study on sisters. So I have been endlessly intrigued by how sisters navigate a path.
I really find that to be very interesting as well. And it is actually my next question. I have 3 daughters myself, and I'm one of 4 children. There's 3 girls, and we have a brother as well. So I've grown up in a lot of the sisterly dynamic and then raising sisters. And most recently was working on a book about the Mitfords, which is 6 sisters who were pretty notorious in the 30s and 40s. But in any case, my question was, since you've explored so much the relationships between different women, mothers, daughters, sisters, as you said, and you did that with your nonfiction work as well as working at the university, correct? Marymount, is that where you teach?
At Marymount Manhattan College, yeah.
Yeah, so what got you interested in doing all of that, and how do you think that has influenced your fiction writing?
My nonfiction really informs my fiction. And one of the most incendiary nonfiction projects that I ever did is about why women lie and keep secrets. And I remember while I was on a book tour for that, someone came up to me and said, "How could you write this book? Of course we lie and keep secrets. How else would we get through?" So being really intrigued by the faces we wear versus how we really feel, I take that research, and for my nonfiction books, I've interviewed per book somewhere between 200 and 500 women, including questionnaires many times, but a diverse pool of women in terms of age and ethnicity and race and religion and level of education in parts of the country. And what I've learned, and so when I said I purposely put this in Palm Beach where everything should be perfect, what I've learned about women is it really doesn't matter your level of education or the amount of money you make or what you have materially. If you are unhappy as a wife, struggling as a mother, dislike your mother-in-law, have female rivals. So the emotional issues for women are really pretty universal. And I'm thinking now with my professor's cap on, and societally prescribed. So we're looking at female behavior, which is innate deeply within us. I mean, we're not all jealous to the same degree. We're not all competitive to the same degree. If you have 3 daughters, Eliza, you know how different and distinctive they are in many ways, but there's females in a contemporary society. And so what is nature belongs to us, but what is nurture is a society that tells us what we can and can't have and how we're supposed to be. So that really informs my fiction, all of this research.
It's so fascinating, too, to hear you talk about it, just because everything that's going on in the world today, I mean, one of the things I found in my research is it seems like the more things change, the more they also still stay the same. So
I agree with you.
Yeah. It's like a cycle, I guess.
Well, the way we're positioned as females in society has been a very slow dawning and awakening for women to have voice. And when my kids were little and I was first starting out, I used to say to my girls, everything I do for you. And my son would say, well, what about me? And I'd say, male supremacy is so much a part of the fabric of our lives that I can't quite say it's the same.
Yeah.
So I'm always really trying to understand what a woman endures. And in this novel, in A Palm Beach Scandal, I really wanted to look at, not to spoil the story, not to give anything away, but I wanted to look at how 2 very different sisters are positioned even by their parents.
Yes, really, that's one thing I noticed right off the bat was the different way they were treated by their parents, even different from the parents treating each different one. So it was just really, really interesting that you did that, and I enjoyed that a lot. I think people will really connect with that and sort of see it in their own various relationships too, which is really neat. So next question, you don't need to name any names, but so your characters, were they inspired by anyone you've met along the way?
Not inspired by people I know personally, but definitely inspired by listening to so many women, in the aggregate thousands and thousands of women, over 13 nonfiction titles, and really understanding their longing, what we hope for. And the mother-daughter, I've written about mothers and daughters, and in several of my nonfiction studies, including my book on female competition called Tripping the Prom Queen. But I did an entire study. I should send you this book because I interviewed women with daughters from the age of 3 to over 30 about why, as mothers, we make so many excuses for our daughters. We treat them very differently if we have sons as well. And it's called You're Grounded Forever, but first let's go shopping. And I'm taking a look at the messaging that we really give, what we message to our daughters and why, based on society at large and based on our own experiences.
So, not to give anything away from the book, because I don't think this will give anything away, but I'm wondering if Baby M is a real story, or did you make that one up?
Baby M is that they reference in the novel that Veronica talks about with her daughters.
Mm-hmm.
So Baby M is a true story of and really underscores the bioethics of surrogacy in our culture. And by the way, so here's something I'll share with you. Many years ago, right after I wrote the book on sisters, I called Sisters Devoted or Divided, and did that study, I was asked by my publisher at the time to do a book on infertility, gestational carrier, and surrogacy. And Baby M had taken place, this was like the early to mid 90s when this was happening. And it's a book that I hope that you understand, this book actually didn't get published. Has that ever happened to you? Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's devastating, but okay, it happened a while ago. But I did all the research, and Baby M was a very famous case about a woman who was hired by a couple to be the surrogate and ended up wanting to keep the baby. And I even interviewed at that time his long dead, but Noel Keane, who was the big lawyer for Mary Beth Whitehead, and their baby was called Baby M. But what was so fascinating to me, and remains so fascinating, is that the bioethics are not established. So while it's very easy in many cases to find, an egg donor or a carrier or someone who provides both, the ethics and the rules about it haven't really been honed in all these years since I did that nonfiction study. So without giving my book away, because it's a story within a story, the book does start with one sister, the perfect sister who's done everything right, the pleaser. I'm fascinated by the good girl in our society, the price we pay for that. And so she asks her sister, who's younger and fancy free and doesn't aspire to a fancy Palm Beach life or to the, glittering prizes, as I call this, and tripping the prom queen, husbands, houses, children, career, material goods, beauty, all of the glittering prizes. That's not really what she's looking for. And so what's so fascinating is once she agrees, then we really open up an entire story.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. And also, I have so many mixed feelings about her sister asking her to do that too. Like, on one hand, it feels like, oh, that would be the perfect match. But on the other hand, it is not the perfect match, because then you're asking her sister to, put her own life on hold. So,
and the ask is so enormous, but it's also so loaded.
Right.
So I'm really looking at family systems, because Elodie, the older sister who can have a baby and has a perfect husband who's pressuring her, and again, without giving the story away, I'm very interested, as I said earlier, in the role of wife and what do we do to sustain a marriage? How safe do we really feel in a marriage? And how much do we lose sometimes?
And I think you did a really good job exploring that with their marriage.
Thank you.
I have to say, so, I wasn't a total fan of James.
Oh, you are?
No.
No, not. Right. And yet on paper, isn't he what we're taught to want? Isn't he sort of a prince?
Yes. Yeah, that was really interesting. So I have another question, of course. Elodie works with books, which I have to say, I love that. And I love her job. And if I weren't an author, I would completely want her job. So what made you decide to give her that sort of a position?
The way that I create my characters is I think about them. I wonder if you do this too. I think of them for a very long time before I start the book. I always know the beginning of my story and the end, but of course, you and I both know it's the trip there it's the journey that's so striking, shall we say, so demanding.
Yes.
But the characters I really felt, and I knew that Elodie's love of books, it felt very authentic to me. It was, as they say, organic, it
Yes.
just came to me.
I love that. And so I have the same sort of question about Aubrey, about the music industry. And I'm curious how you came up with that interest for her and position for her, and if you possibly have any experience in the music industry yourself.
Just that I love music so much. When it comes to Elodie's work, it's so familiar to me. And for, just working at the Literary Society, that was a natural. And I agree with you, were I not writing, I would want to be in a place as I've put her. But for Aubrey, it fit. It really fit that she would be drawn to that and that it would really resonate for her. But researching the music and really thinking about the kind of music she would like was terrific. It was just you're a researcher because of the types of books you write. So I think you'll appreciate this. It really could almost take me away from my writing some days.
Yes, you're going down that rabbit hole.
Right, exactly.
So did you create a playlist that maybe your readers would be able to find somewhere?
I should do that. I did
Yes.
not. I just, and the bands, I really researched bands and they're fictive bands.
Yeah.
But the music that they love is real. And so I didn't do it, but that's a great idea. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. I love those. I've seen those a lot. And they're really fun because then when people are reading, they can listen to the music or listen to it later, or at least see like the songs that you like too. So next question for you is, your book deals with a lot of heavy topics, some of which we've already discussed. I'm curious about how you decided to include what you did, and then if there was anything you thought about including but ultimately took out. A loaded question, I know.
Yeah, and a really interesting, I've been on a pretty long book tour in terms of virtual events, and it's been wonderful to meet other women writers in particular and indie bookstores. And I've been asked a lot of good questions, and I'm putting that question and the playlist idea right at the top here.
Oh, thank you.
So what did I take out? I took out I know you're not going to believe me, but I took out some of the descriptions of Palm Beach and the clothing. And, for a Palm Beach wife, which is the first in the series, because St. Martin's calls it the Palm Beach novels, the first it had to do with a woman who ran a fictive vintage shop in Palm Beach on Worth Avenue. So if you go to Worth Avenue and you look for a vintage house, you won't find it, but I created it. And for that, I really studied everything from, vintage costume jewelry like Miriam Haskell to Seaman Sheps that everyone has to have, to an Erdem dress, to, a Prada bag, the price of Hermes. Oh, this is a little off topic, but worth sharing. And that is that when I priced the Hermes bag that was being resold, the copy editor flagged me and said I was $2,000 lower.
Whoa.
Just the incredible amount of wealth. And it became part of the story because this woman's husband loses everything. And that's that story. So in this story, while I still do a lot of label, objects, I actually pared it down, Eliza, whether it's evident or not. So that was one thing that I cut a little bit.
One of the funny things that people might not think I cut recently from a book was all of the names of people. So I was writing about someone who was an actual person, and in all of her letters, she mentions all these friends. So in my first pass edits, that was the thing that I had to do, was take out all the names. And I think it's funny how we take out all these things that people don't think that we might, like, for example, like description or objects, and for myself, names.
Or do you ever find with dialogue that you pare it down? I usually pare down the dialogue too.
Yes.
Mm.
There's some extraneous things that end up in there or don't really matter.
And sometimes writers say that when they revisit their books, they say, "Oh, why did I do it that way?" You know, that we second guess ourselves.
Right. So I know that your series, the Palm Beach novels, the books are standalones. And do they have to be read in order, or do you think people can read them out of order?
They don't. It was really very contemplated by my editor that the books would not be a series. So if I said series, it was a misnomer, that they would be companion books and also standalone. So, you know, you just pick one up and it takes place in Palm Beach, and Palm Beach is almost a character, but novels actually speak for themselves.
And how long of a drive is it from Miami to Palm Beach? I'm just curious, since Aubrey drives back and forth quite a bit.
Right, she does, right. And the whole time she does it, she says to herself, why isn't anyone except for Simon, the father, one time coming to why is no one coming to Miami? And that's how she feels in terms of family systems and how she's set in the family.
Yes.
I would say it can be 2 hours in traffic, and on a good day, maybe less, an hour and a half.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a long drive.
It's a long drive.
And
a very different place.
Yes. My sister lives in, one of my sisters lives in Philly, which is 2.5 hours for me. And one of my sister lives on the eastern shore of Maryland, which is about 1 hour and 40 minutes from me. And we always have to do a lot of back and forth to each other's houses too. And it's not a short drive. That's pretty long.
No.
So
but
I want to do it every day.
But you know, Eliza, that really does speak to the book, because Aubrey always feels, well, until the pregnancy she feels that she's still pleasing her family as she tries to separate.
Yeah.
So the trip is sort of symbolic.
Yeah, I like that. That's a good symbol. So what is next for you?
I'm now working daily on the third in this trilogy. And then I'm starting another novel, a different kind of novel.
Ooh.
And I have a few nonfiction book ideas, because nonfiction is just also I know that you write several types of fiction. So I think you'll appreciate that, you know, one can't really abandon a form that has been so meaningful to work on. Yes.
And they're different. Even in fiction, different genres you have to be in a different sort of headspace for it. So you have to So you say that in your series, the first 2 books, there are some characters that do make like cameos or crossovers, right? Or
They do.
am I wrong? And are we going to see the same thing with the third book?
Yes, Mrs. A in particular, who shows up a bit in a Palm Beach Scandal and is referenced.
Yes.
She was a bigger character in A Palm Beach Wife, and I'm just finishing a scene where she says something very pithy in my third Palm Beach novel.
When can we expect that? And do you have a title?
I have a title, but it's a working title, and I don't know pub date yet.
All right. Well, we'll hope that it's soon.
Oh, thank you.
In the publishing world, soon means like a year, though, sometimes too.
Isn't it incredible? It's incredible. It's like hurry up to wait.
Yes. I signed my book, You've Got Plaid, that just came out. I signed that contract in 2018. And it was for the third book in a series. So it took a while for the books to come out, but it just seems like, okay, now we've got 3 years to go.
I know. And at the same time, a book could be rushed.
Mm-hmm.
You know, a publisher it depends on their scheduling.
Yeah, that's true.
Right. So,
well, is there anything else that you want to add before I take questions from our audience?
I just wanted to say that for my nonfiction, which, as I said, so really informs the fiction, that when I first started out, let me quote the late, great Toni Morrison, who said, I paraphrase, but she said, if there is a book that you need and you can't find it, you should write it.
Yes.
And one of the early studies that I did is on mothers-in-law and daughters-in-law. And in A Palm Beach Scandal, I'm pretty happy with Mimi, the mother-in-law. I mean,
Yes.
she was definitely a result of my research. and so the idea that women look for information through books has resonated through both my fiction and my nonfiction. And
Yeah.
I just love the world of women writers and what they choose to write about.
I love that answer because it's so true. I was asking readers in a online forum that I was a part of last week what their favorite thing about historical fiction is, but it could relate to contemporary too. But I was asking why they love it, and the majority of the people said was that they learned things. And I just think
how research, I think that, let me just interrupt, I'm sorry, but I think the research is so evident in historical fiction, and that really enriches the book.
It does.
Yeah.
And the one thing I don't think people understand, though, is that even for modern day books, you still have to do a ton of research.
Oh, totally.
Yeah, it's not just, we can say write what we know, but I don't know. And like you were mentioning the Hermes bag, we don't know exactly how much that costs. We know what one might look like. So it's very interesting. Are you ready for questions?
Oh, sure.
Okay. So the first question looks like it's from, well, she says, hello, Susannah. I was going to say it's from Susannah, but that's not right. It's from Valerie. And she says, hello, Susannah. I read Palm Beach Wife. Is this a sequel? Do you have to read the first to read Palm Beach Scandal? I think we kind of already answered that, but if you want to add to it.
We could just say to Valerie that this is not a sequel. It's a standalone novel, but also with Palm Beach as almost a character in the novel. And you don't have to read the first to read A Palm Beach Scandal.
Well, I have one question going off of the beach. It just popped into my head. So how often do you get to go to Palm Beach? Or did you get to go for your when you were writing? Or
Yes. I went all the time until 3.5 years ago, my mother died and my father sold their home there soon after.
Sorry.
Yeah, well, I mean, that it's just to me so sad that she didn't get to. The last thing she was my first and probably most critical reader, and she read the draft of A Palm Beach Wife before it went into St. Martin's and was approved, and that meant so much to me, and I dedicated the book to her. But in any case, I used to be there all the time, every vacation, and that really brings, if we have one moment, something I'd like to mention. Because I'm a gender professor, I've long been interested in ageism and how it applies to women in our culture. And so in Palm Beach, and one reason I really wanted to do the Palm Beach novels, and I told this to St. Martin's and to my agent, and place it in Palm Beach, is because ageism in Palm Beach seems to be very different from other places. So my mother started as a young woman in Palm Beach because my father was a ranked, but amateur, but ranked tennis player.
Oh, wow.
Palm Beach. And so they were invited into a lot of places that they might not have been invited to in terms of a kind of closed society back in the day. And then of course the society opens up, as it does everywhere, we hope, and it does. But the point is that no matter what decade, my mother and her friends really had voice and agency. And Mrs. A, the character, is actually reflective of that. So she started in her 30s, but her 40s, 50s, 60s, she always felt really present and not invisible. Whereas in New York City, where I teach, I observe anecdotal, qualitative research. I observe how older women are treated on the Upper East Side of Manhattan, and it's almost as if they are invisible. It's not true in Palm Beach, and I found that really fascinating.
That is really fascinating.
Really interesting.
I want to share something that I heard today when I went to get my hair done today. I haven't gotten it done since.
Looks great.
Thank you. And there was an older woman beside me getting her hair colored. And something that she said to her stylist really like gutted me. She said, I've got to get rid of all these grays because I feel so ashamed when I'm going to visit friends or something like that. And she said, I'm going to feel so ashamed with my grays. And I just thought, whoa, like, why? We all go gray. That's normal. And it just made me so sad.
It's very sad. And I actually had this conversation with my daughters recently, where I said, I wish I had the guts to go gray. And they said, oh, Mom, why don't you? I think that gray for women, well, an example would be, again, anecdotal, qualitative observances, research. Walk into a restaurant, they're open again, walk into restaurants, take a look at the amount of men with white hair at the table, and miraculously, the women they're with are not gray, even if they're the same age about.
It's so true.
And it's a societal message that old and gray are synonymous, and that women who are older have very little agency anyway. So it's a double whammy. And what you overheard is absolutely, to me, reflective of that message from the society at large.
Yeah. So are the women in Palm Beach going gray, or are they coloring too?
They're so not going gray, and they're so very, very attentive to their appearance. And, and another question, we didn't really get to this, but they can spend a lot of money on their appearance. And there's a lot of talk of Botox and filler and facelifts and, tummy tucks. And it's available to them. It's affordable. And there is the pressure to look good, preserved, and young.
Yeah.
So no one's going gray.
No. Oh my goodness. So Meredith H has a question.
Okay.
And she says, I saw that you use a pen name for your novels. Why?
So the question is a good one, because a pen name, we talked about this off before we went live, right?
Mm-hmm.
First of all, I always wanted the pen name that I have. My mother came to visit me. My parents came when I was in college. And I said I was in my second year and I was studying writing at Sarah Lawrence. And I said to my mother, Mom, it's really great here. And I'm, so happy. And I'm going to write books. And I have an idea. Since Susan Rona Shapiro was my name at the time, I said, so here's the name I want. I'll take the A from Rona, I'll make it Susannah, and I'll, take the family name Marren. And my mother said to me, you can't do that, because I thought long and hard about your name, which was shocking to me because the result wasn't that great. But she said she thought long and hard about it. And she said, and one day you'll have children and you'll understand. And I remember saying to myself, I'm 19 in this scene, Eliza. I remember thinking, wow, I'm going to give my children better names than mine. And they can do whatever they want with them. Right? They can. But because I was the good girl, and I'm pretty interested in the price that we pay to be a good girl, I never did that because it was against my mother's wishes. And then when I started to go back to fiction writing, which I had left for many years, I told my agent I wanted a pen name, and she was skeptical, but St. Martin's, my publisher, wanted it too. And it's because it differentiates the genres, and it is because fiction really usually, like you have a great name, Eliza Knight's a great name. So fiction writers often have great names. Don't you think that just turns out to be the case?
Well, mine's fake too, but I do love it.
Wait, Knight isn't your last name?
No, so Knight is actually my husband's middle name, and it's a family name on his side. And since I was writing historical, and my real name is not historical or beautiful and very hard to pronounce, I decided to take that name.
I feel so happy to hear this story.
Yes.
Yeah, it's great.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's a really beautiful name. And I I really am sorry that I didn't do it sooner. So, kudos to you.
Well, now you have the names to differentiate, though.
I do.
And that does make it easier, probably.
It's better.
Yeah.
And a lot of famous writers do it.
Yeah, that's true.
So, I mean, not just Mark Twain. So, but a lot of writers have done it over time.
That's true. Very true. So another question, this one is from Rona H, which is funny because you said that was your middle name, right? Rona with an H. What are you working on now? And she says about my series that she's read the Highlander series and she loves them. Thank you, Rona. And that she's very excited to start the Palm Beach books. So I think we kind of already talked about what you have coming up.
Well, you should talk about, your series and and that you have a new book coming out.
Thank you. Yeah. So my the book You've Got Plaid just released. That was the third book in my Prince Charlie's Angel series, and that series is now complete. And I've just started the release of my new series, Scots of Honor, and the first book is Return of the Scot. And if you like historical fiction, my book, The Mayfair Bookshop, will be releasing in April. And I'm really excited about that. And you might like, I might actually want to talk to you about that sometime, Susannah, too, because that book deals with a well-known family that I was telling you earlier that takes place in the 1920s, 30s, 40s, and it's a large family and a lot of sibling rivalry. For example, one sister is the rumored lover of a Nazi. One sister is a communist and immigrates to the United States and ends up doing a lot of civil rights activism. One is the lover of another fascist leader. And then one sister who becomes a famous author, that's the woman I was writing about, does a lot of good works in a sort of...
These are the Mitfords, right?
Yes, yes.
I researched them, not as you are doing, but I researched them a bit for my book on sisters.
Oh, okay. Well, then I'm definitely going to be reading that book because it is really fascinating.
That's a wonderful subject for a book.
Yeah, it was very, very crazy.
Oh, very interesting.
Yeah, it was really wild. I first found out about them actually in college because my degree's in family studies. So I sort of like have a lot of interest in family dynamics and siblings and all the same sort of things as you.
Right.
So that's what's next for me. And let's see. A question from Jennifer C. And this one, again, is a question for both of us. You go first. Are your books appropriate for teenage girls?
So that's a really interesting question. My nonfiction books, several titles are really good for teenage girls. One is called Toxic Friends, the antidote for women stuck in complicated friendships. And I actually categorize by name. I like devise names for different types of friends, the misery lover, and the competitive friend. So that definitely is useful. And the same with Tripping the Prom Queen, my study on female rivalry. In terms of my fiction, I would say that Between the Tides, my first novel, might be good for, and the other two titles, maybe, but one would really have to think about, I mean, how old is this teenager? If she's 13, maybe not. If she's 18, certainly, of course.
That's a really good answer. I also want to read your nonfiction books.
Thank you.
So I would say that my Highlander books are probably for older teenagers, like 18, 19. I have a 20-year-old, and I let her read one when she was 18, and she got about 3 chapters in and said, I don't like this. I can hear your voice, and that's not okay. And I was like, thank God, because I actually didn't want you to read that book. But my historical fiction, I think they're probably okay for older teenage girls. They're not very sexy or anything like that, but probably not for younger ones. So hopefully that answers that question. All right, next up from Cheryl B. Surrogacy was represented very well. I have a friend who went through this. Did you know someone, or how did you do the research for this portion of the novel? Did you have sympathy for one of the sisters more than the other? That is a really good question.
Really good question. So the first part of the question, I did a lot of research on this, but as I had said earlier this evening, I had been really commissioned to research gestational carrier and surrogacy. And so from the time I did that research, I thought that one day I would write a novel about it, because it has, to me, so much intrigue. And because, as I said before, the bioethics are not really cultivated in a way that makes sense completely. So it's pretty fascinating to me. And then the second part of the question is,
did you have sympathy for one sister over the other?
I really understood how both sisters felt. I don't want to give away the end of this book, but I don't judge my characters, just as I don't judge my nonfiction research. I had done a whole study on female infidelity, and I really took a look at what makes a woman feel the need for a lover, rather than judging her in terms of, say, the Scarlet Letter. So I'm very interested in how women feel in order to do what they do. And so that really applies to my characters in this novel.
That's a great answer. Question from Leanne T. Eliza, I love your books, and thank you very much for that. Have you met the models of your covers? Wow. So I have met a couple of the models on my covers. There used to be a conference called the Romantic Times Conference, where a lot of the models would come and meet the authors and mingle with the readers, which was really fun for them, I think. So I have met a couple of them, but not all of them. Okay, we have another question from Samantha Rice, and this says, for both authors, what are you reading now, and do you have an all-time favorite book? All right, you go first.
Right now I'm reading a book called Rock the Boat by Beck Dory Stein. It just came out, and I just began it, and I'm reading a novel by a friend called The Accidental Suffragist.
Ooh, I think I've heard of that one.
It just came, I went to the book party, actually. It was like one of the first real live outdoors, but I went, and that's historical, and it's about, the suffragist movement in America.
I love that. That's cool.
And so I'm reading those two books. And then I just finished a book called Cooking for Picasso.
Ooh, that sounds fun.
A novel, historical, moves back and forth in time, historical in terms of Picasso's life. Very interesting novel. So reading some really good things. In terms of favorite authors, there are many authors I admire for different reasons. I read all different kinds of fiction and nonfiction. I think that books are magical, and I think that we learn so much from reading. It's just an incredible experience. And so I really, certain books that I really love and I revisit, Buddenbrooks by Thomas Mann. I think it's one of the most remarkable novels I've ever read. Sophie's Choice, although it's so heartbreaking, but I admire it greatly. I love Edith Wharton. I love Margaret Atwood. Just, contemporary, and, I love all of Jane Austen, because we all do.
Yes.
And, just constantly looking at new books too.
Yep. Always reading. There was a meme I saw the other day that I thought was hilarious, and it said something about the fact that you have a pile, your TBR pile, and you say to your TBR pile, like, I'm not going to read any more books I'm not going to buy any more books until I read all of you. And then the next picture is, oh, there's a bookstore. And then you're going inside and getting all the books.
And you know what? It's also really important for me to buy books.
Yes.
I would rather buy books than just about anything else because I feel I owe it to the author to own the book.
Yeah.
And on occasion I'll pass it on. And if I'm going to a dinner party or just somewhere where there's a gift to bring, I will always buy a book. And when my friends, had children and grandchildren and family members, I always buy children's books.
I love children's books too.
So what kind of writers do you like, Eliza?
So I also like Austen, but one of my favorite books is Jane Eyre. I think that's such a complicated book. And another book that I really love is Pillars of the Earth, which I've read about every decade. The first time I read it when I was 14, and then I read it in my 20s and 30s and 40s. And the really interesting thing about that book is that it changes every time I read it, depending on life experiences that I've had, or my interests have changed too. For example, there's pages upon pages of cathedral building, which in my teens and in my 20s, I could care less about building a cathedral and what went into the architecture behind it. And then I found in my 30s, I was like, wow, actually, these pages are very interesting. And the different relationship dynamics change too. So I really like that one a lot. So those are probably the ones I've read over and over again the most. But recently, I was listened to, because I love audiobooks, Local Woman Missing by Mary Kubica. And that was a really good thriller, which I love. And one of my favorite genres. And then I'm also reading right now a book called Island Queen by Vanessa Riley, which is a historical fiction about a woman living in the islands. It's really, really interesting.
And what was the first title? I wrote down Island Queen.
Oh, sure. Local Woman Missing.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. And that looks like all the questions that are in the comment section.
This was a great evening. You two were wonderful. I love the conversation, and the questions were great, Eliza. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Susannah, I'm ready to go and get all your books.
Me too.
It was a great conversation. Thank you both for being here tonight for our To Be Read series and our summer series. On behalf of Carroll County Public Library and A Likely Story, we really do appreciate it. And please, everybody out there, we do have them in stock, both Eliza and Susannah's books, and we will get her nonfiction in if we don't have it, that's for sure. So please join us on Sunday. We have another of our summer series with Emily Richards in conversation with Diane Chamberlain. And thank you. See you soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, everyone. Good evening.
Good night.